Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and I want to find out which has the best camera, the Huawei P20 Pro or the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. According to DxOMark, it's the P20 Pro, which has just taken the top spot from the S9 Plus. But I think these benchmarks should be taken with a pinch of salt, so I wanted to test it for myself. So I took both phones around Paris and a little bit of London, taking a bunch of photos and videos to find out which looks best. And if you want to see more of my photos and some behind the scenes pictures, then follow me on Instagram at the Tech Chap. Let's kick off with a nice daylight picture of Paris. And the first thing I notice is the P20's photo really does stand out more. It's much sharper and more vivid. Just look at the waves in the river. But if you crop in by 300%, then the P20 looks far too over-sharpened. The colors on the S9 Plus look a little washed out, but it's softer and I think it's got a more pleasant look to it. But if we compare the same photo, zoomed in, but shot at 40 megapixels on the P20, well, it's a completely different story. It's darker, but it also lacks all that ugly over-sharpening of the 10 megapixel image. So let's go back to the first picture I showed you. That's with the P20 at 10 megapixels. Now let's change that to 40. Clearly there's a big difference between the 10 and 40 megapixel options on the P20, so that's something I'm going to look at later in this video. Moving on, and with both cameras back to their default auto modes, well, there's not much in it for this picture. It's quite hard to tell them apart. The colors on the P20 do look a bit more natural, whereas the S9 has a slightly warmer hue. And if you look at the clouds, there's definitely more detail and dynamic range on the P20's image. Zooming in again by 300%, I don't really think there's a clear winner here. The text on the conveniently placed Galaxy S9 poster is ever so slightly sharper on the P20, and there's a little bit more detail in the clouds, but that's about it. Now, to see how the camera's held up when taking photos of a fast-moving object, well, here is a husky puppy that would not stay still. I can't work out if he's cute or evil looking, maybe both, but between the two photos, I definitely prefer the P20 here. It's more in focus, it's sharper, and has much more natural colors. Let's have a look at how video quality compares, and straight away you can see the P20 is really shaky compared to the S9. Incredibly, the P20 has no optical image stabilization when shooting 4K video. It doesn't even shoot 4K 60, unlike the S9. To get decent stabilization, we have to drop the P20 down to 1080p, which does make it much smoother. But the S9 is clearly the winner here in overall detail and stabilization. Now, I really don't like selfies, but I'll take a few just to test out the front cameras. I definitely prefer the S9's picture here. Beauty modes are turned off on both, but the P20 still looks far too soft. Now, this is a tricky shot and a good test of the camera's dynamic range. They both handle it really well, there's not really much in it here. And zooming in by 500%, the slightly different color temperature is about the only real noticeable difference. The S9 comes across as just a bit too warm. These photos were taken at the same time, about 8:30 p.m, but the S9 Plus uses its wider f1.5 aperture, which makes it look a lot brighter. The real-life color was somewhere between the two, neither captured it perfectly. But what's interesting though is if we zoom in, since both cameras have telephoto lenses, you can also see the difference between the 2x optical zoom on the S9 Plus and the 3x optical zoom you get on the P20. In this shot, the S9 handles the low tungsten light much better than the P20, which is far too orange. Although the P20's kept the man in the striped red jumper in focus, whereas he's a bit of a blur on the S9. But for the colors alone, I think I prefer the S9 here. Group selfie time, we've got Super Saf, Mr. Who's the Boss, and Nathan from Expert Reviews here, all the big names, but once again, the P20 comes out just far too soft. I double-checked beauty modes were off or set to 0, yet my face looks ridiculously smooth and soft. I know a lot of people do like beauty modes, and that's fine, but it should let me turn it off completely if I prefer. So for me, I definitely prefer the S9's front selfie camera. So it's about 9 p.m. on a gloomy night here in Paris, and I really like both of these shots, but the P20 stands out for me with more vibrant and natural colors. There's a constant yellow-orange hue to the S9's pictures that I just don't particularly like. One last selfie in terrible lighting conditions, and they both look pretty rubbish to be fair. Neither stands out as significantly better. I should definitely have used the flash here, I think. Now, what about low light video? Both are shooting in 4K here, but once again, the S9 Plus is the clear winner in terms of video. The P20 is shaky, there's a lot more noise, and it's just not as bright. In complete darkness, there's actually less between them. They both look pretty decent, but I'll always prefer the more stable looking S9 video. one last nighttime shot and the S9 is once again much brighter. But at the same time, it also blows out some of the brighter highlights, like the parking sign on the left, which looks better on the P20. So it's the next day, I'm back in London, St Pancras Station to be exact, and I thought I'd do another quick test of the video. And because I'm standing still, so we're not getting that ridiculous jerky shakiness, here I think I prefer the more detailed and better dynamic range on the P20. Now this is a time-lapse of the London skyline, and aside from slight colour temperature differences, there's not really much in it here. They both handle time-lapses really well. As for slow motion, both phones shoot 960 FPS super slow motion at 720p, although the S9 has better options for controlling it when it records the slow motion. Quality-wise, they're both pretty bad even in good light, but I do think the S9 looks a little bit sharper and more detailed overall. Here's one more example of video. I'm walking through Hyde Park here, again both in 4K, and once again the P20 is a shaky mess. But drop it to 1080 and it's super smooth. I do hope this is something that Huawei can fix with a software update, which is not unheard of. We did see something similar with the OnePlus 5. Now before we finish and conclude which is best, let me show you one more picture. I really like this shot and it proves how you really can't go wrong with either of these cameras. But for me, the P20 is just too sharp. Clearly the camera's software processing is increasing the sharpness, but it's too much. But again, let me show you the difference if we take the same picture, but with the P20 set to 40 megapixels. To my eye, it's so much nicer. It's a little darker, but it loses the ridiculous over-sharpening and offers a much more pleasing photo. Although you do then lack some of the stabilization and also the ability to zoom in while in this mode. So what do you think? From these photos, videos and selfies, which do you think has the better camera? But for me, while obviously this is very subjective, I think the P20 takes a better photo with the rear camera. Overall, it has more accurate colors and more detail. I also like that you have the option between 10 and 40 megapixel photos, and it's cool that the phone's AI will automatically pick the best camera settings. But I think the S9 Plus comes out on top for selfies and for video. So which is best kind of comes down to what you're going to use your camera for. But I think if I had to pick a winner, I think I would go with the Galaxy S9 Plus. Except for slightly warmer colors and sometimes not offering quite as good dynamic range, I think it's the best all-rounder. But again, you really can't go wrong with either. They're both terrific phones and have incredible cameras. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, click that like and subscribe button below, and check out my Instagram @TheTechChap for more photos like these. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time right here on The Tech Chap.